Hi, thanks for joining me tonight. We're going to be learning about watercolor brushes. We're going to be having a look at the brushes that I've used over many years, but more particularly we're going to be figuring out, well, what are the 5 brushes that you really need in order to get started in watercolor. So stay with me tonight as we get stuck in to watercolor brushes. Thank you. So thanks for joining me tonight. We are going to be talking about all these different brushes here, and not just brushes. We're also going to be looking at the razor blades, knives, tweezers, and what I really use to paint in watercolor. So first things first, when you're painting watercolor in the way that I paint, which is with big bowls of wash, or even if you're not using big bowls of wash and you're using smaller bowls of wash, you're still going to need some mixing brushes. And probably generally what I do is I have 2 different mixing brushes, one for cool colors and one for warm colors, but you don't need 2 different ones. You could just get away with having one mixing brush. So these are the mixing brushes that I use, and they're very cheap hog's hair bristle brushes, and you can get them very cheaply from anywhere, and you can really treat them very badly, and you really need to be able to, because if I spray some water into this and then I let that sit there, then when it comes time to mixing that, I'm going to have to use this brush. I'm going to have to use this brush very firmly to mix that all up. Obviously the longer I leave that there, the less I'll have to work hard, but these brushes, you really want to pound away with them and really mix that watercolor very firmly until it's all mixed up. And you really should never do that with any of the brushes that are important to you. So that's the first thing, mixing brushes, very important. Really the next brush that I think is very important is a round sable. So this is my pure Kolinsky's round sable. It's a size 12, and I've had this brush for about 20 years now. So if you make an investment in brushes and you look after them, they will last for a very long time. The thing about a round sable is that it is phenomenal at holding water. So if I load that up with water right now, that can hold an awful lot of water, and so when I go to put that down onto the page, it will lay down a lot of water for a fair period of time. And also what it'll do is it'll suck water up. So if I flick all that water out and I want to take some off the page, it will suck that water up very well. So a round sable will do, that'll put a lot of water onto the page and it'll take a lot of water off. And also you can make it go to a beautiful shape, and I don't know if you can see that, but it will go to a beautiful sharp point if you want it to. And interestingly, for a round sable, if you wet it and flick it out, it'll go to a point, and that's because of the hairs becoming thinner. Whereas if you buy a cheaper brush like this one here, this becomes thinner to a point because the bristles have been cut up into a point. So it behaves quite differently. And so this brush, when I flick it, does go to a point, and it will hold a fair bit of water and put it onto the page, but it's very solid in the heel part of the brush here. Very solid. It traps a lot of pigment in there, which I don't really like. Whereas this is soft all the way through, and you know, you can paint with the heel of it. I really don't know where I would be without this single brush here, which I was very lucky to be given by my mentor many years ago, so Tony Smybert. So a round sable, I think, is probably, if you're going to only buy one brush, the most important brush. Of course you can get, I got this the other day for $12. It's an imitation Sable, and if you don't have a lot of money, then you could use that. And I'll be trying out over the next coming weeks different brushes, so I can give you an idea of what I think you might be able to get if you don't want to spend $200 on a pure Kolinsky Sable. So a round Sable is very important. It's very good for laying down washes. It's very good for doing a lot of effects, and actually you can treat them fairly firmly, and you won't be ruining them in any way, shape or form. So so they're the different round Sables that you can get, and I'd say that you definitely need one of those. So definitely get your hands on a round Sable. This one's a size 12, and I would say don't go too small. Again, don't go too small with your brushes. The next brushes that I think are important are these flat nylon brushes. So this is my favorite one. It's got a nice bit of length to the bristles, and I use this for doing mountain ranges, and I also use it for cutting out lights. If I was to get this page here and I wanted to cut out a lake there, then I would use this flat nylon brush as a point, and I could run that back and forth along that, and that would take that light out. And then if I get a tissue and wipe that out, then that is a really great way of taking out a light part out of the watercolor. So yes, these two nylon brushes I use, but I definitely use this one more. Also, this longer length makes it softer on the page, so when I'm painting on the page it's softer, whereas this one here is a little bit more solid. So obviously, knowing that, I could use it in a certain way, but it's why I prefer this one, because it's got a little bit more softness on the page when I'm working. So I think you could definitely do with a flat nylon. They're not expensive, and again, very, very useful in watercolor for getting hard edges. If you want to be able to get some sharp square edges, then a round Sable is very hard to get very sharp square edges. You can, but it's a bit more difficult given the shape of the brush. And we'll do some exercises later on how to paint and make different marks and things, but a flat nylon is definitely a brush that you need. The next brushes that I think are worth having is some hake brushes. Now I've got some different size hake brushes here. As you can see here, I've got a 1 inch, a 2 inch, a 2.5 inch, and this is about a 5 inch hake brush. And I like the Holben ones from Japan. They're the ones that I've used a lot of over the years. And the reason why I like them is because if you have a look at this hake brush here, I tried trimming this, it was too long. But if you have a look there, how thick the bristles are, that will just load up a whole lot of watercolor that you'll waste. So I really don't like, that's an Art Spectrum one, I really don't like them. They're too thick, and you can't really handle the paint at all with them. Whereas these, they're beautifully made, and obviously as they get a bit older, the hairs start coming out a bit. You don't really want that. Hence why I have a set of tweezers nearby, because when I'm painting, while it's still wet, I can pick those bristles out. So that's a very handy piece of kit. And if you were going to buy one hake brush, I would say get the 2 inch hake brush. They're beautiful, and they're just beautiful for laying down skies and wash, and not being too fiddly. If you only ever use a small brush like this to lay down your washes, your paintings are always going to look in a certain style. If you start using larger hake brushes, you can lay down washes beautifully, and also they're very nice and soft again, so they don't disturb the paper underneath. So they're beautiful, beautiful hake brushes. But definitely I would say get one hake brush. The next brushes I'm going to talk about are fan brushes, and I've got quite a number of those, but again, you could just do with one fan brush. And if I was going to get one, it would be about this size here. These are some old ones that I've had for many years, and I ended up breaking off the handle so I could use it as a travel kit. I did the same for a few brushes so they didn't take up too much room. But obviously this fan brush is a bit different than some of the others. Had some bristles cut off, and fallen out over the years, so definitely they'll make different marks on the page. But a fan brush is fantastic for grasses and trees, and they'll just give you an effect on the page that you will struggle to get with any other brush. So definitely one fan brush is an important thing. So essentially I've really covered all 5 brushes that you really need already, which is like one mixing brush, definitely one round sable, definitely a hake brush, a fan brush, and a flat nylon brush. So if you were only to get 5 brushes, these are the 5 that I'd say that you get, and in about those sorts of sizes. This is a size 4 fan brush, this is a 2-inch hake brush, this is a size 12 round sable, Kolinsky sable, and this is 8/4 flat nylon, but really just, you know, that sort of size flat nylon, which is about, you know, it's 3/4 of an inch really, that flat nylon. So they're the 5 brushes. Some other things that I do use, good to know, is you can have some flat wash brushes. I generally don't use them as much, but you can get them. Definitely something that I use a bit is some rigger brushes, and these are named obviously because they used to be used to paint the rigging of ships, because of course you could run them up and paint the rigging of ships easily with a very long bristled brush like that. So I've got a couple of rigging brushes. You don't need them, they're good for branches and for rigging, power lines, that sort of thing. So they are a handy brush, but not essential. I've got toothbrushes. You can flick paint or white gouache onto the paper using a toothbrush, is very handy. I've got quite a number of very small pure Kolinsky round sables, series 7. These are beautiful round sables, and to be honest, most of the time I use these to sign my paintings or for doing birds or that sort of thing. But again, not an essential piece of kit for you to use. The other things that I have is I have a sharp knife, and I use that when I'm doing some branches. I might want to drag out from the paint some branches for a tree, so it's very handy for that. The razor blade is very handy in conjunction with the metal ruler to scrape out some lights. So it might be I want to scrape out lights for a lake, or I might want to do some grasses and things out into the paper using that. So it's a very handy. Again, this is similar, just a different shape, and again it will just do a different process with the metal ruler than that one. So these are very handy. Like I mentioned before, a pair of tweezers is very handy for getting the hairs off the page if they come out of any of your brushes, because if a hair is left on the page, then the pigment will often pull against the hair, and that won't be a good thing, and we'll look at that in detail later on. So they're the main things that I use. I also of course use a spray bottle, totally essential. I need to get some more of these. They cost almost nothing. And as I said before, the metal ruler is a very, very good thing. This is a 1 meter long metal ruler. It's very handy for cutting up paper straight, and also lifting out lights for a body of water. So use the metal ruler. If you didn't have a metal ruler, the razor blade would scratch into a plastic ruler. So metal ruler is very, very important. And it means that then you can buy full sheets of paper and cut it up, which saves you a lot of money than buying gummed pads and things. So I think that's mainly it. I think the one brush that you should use if you don't buy any other brush, is a round sable. And if you can get a pure Kolinsky sable of any sort, then I would say get one of those, because this has been the most beautiful brush I've ever owned, and I still love it. Every time I paint with it, it's a beautiful brush. So I would say if you only buy one brush, buy a round sable. So thanks for joining me and learning about brushes tonight. I hope you found that valuable, and I hope you now know at the end of this, if you wanted to paint in watercolor, especially in the style that I paint in, what 5 brushes are really essential, and if you're only going to buy one brush, what is the most important brush to buy. So join me in future episodes. Next time we're going to be looking at paper, and then after that we're going to be getting really stuck into doing different styles of paintings in watercolor. And obviously if you'd like to see or hear something in particular, then let me know in the comments below, and I'll happily do a video on something that you think would be valuable if I can. So thanks for joining me tonight, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.